Welcome to Legal Keys, unlocking time, revenue, and results. The podcast that connects you with the people, technologies, and trending topics shaping the modern legal landscape. From cutting-edge AI innovations to high-growth marketing strategies and everything in between. Legal Keys is your go-to resource for actionable insights. Brought to you by Faster Outcomes and hosted by Tim Sawyer, two-time Inc. 500 co-founder entrepreneur. We're here to help you navigate the tools and trends driving success in today's legal world.
Welcome to Legal Keys, sponsored by Faster Outcomes, the ultimate AI-powered legal intelligence platform for law firms and lawyers of all shapes and sizes. If you're listening for the first time today, thank you. Truly appreciate it. And you picked a great episode to become a listener. I know that. For those of you who follow the podcast, we appreciate your ongoing support. Today's guest, you guys are going to love this, and I'm a little bit out of my element today, almost maybe even intimidated at some levels by my guest today, which is super exciting for me. He is someone who wears many hats and wears them well. He's an attorney, author, thought leader, nonprofit executive, podcast host, and a trusted voice in the evolving world of entertainment, sports, and media law. Jeremy Evans is the founder and managing attorney at California Sports Lawyer. Love to talk about that. Representing entertainment, media, and sports clientele across the globe. He also serves as president of the California Lawyers Foundation. Interested to hear about that as well. Chair of the CLA Task Force on Artificial Intelligence and host of the California Sports Lawyer podcast. 17-time Super Lawyer honoree, Jeremy is a leader in shaping the conversation around NIL. I want to talk about that because that's my sons would be super interested at 29 and 23 years old. So all they talk about is NIL and college sports. The business of sports and the future of legal technology. Jeremy, I really appreciate you taking time today. Thanks, man.
No, it's my pleasure and honored to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's great. And I guess let's start from the beginning, right? Not all lawyers end up in sports and entertainment. So what was that? What was the inspiration behind that? And what was the path to get you here?
So again, it's a pleasure to be with you, and again, honored to be on with you. So my sort of journey was one that I grew up in a large family, youngest of 9 kids, and I've got 50 nephews and nieces now. So it's a really big family. But at the time, my brothers and sisters all got married very young, 17, 18, 19 years old. And had kids immediately. And that's something that probably would have happened to me as well had I met the right woman for me. But that did not happen. And I think I also had additional dreams and aspirations, and I was able to learn a lot from my brothers and sisters and from my parents. My dad is a salesman, and my mom was a registered nurse. They're both retired now. And so I was the only one to go to college, and first to go to college, and go to graduate school. And I've had a sister. My oldest sister now is so awesome. She now graduated with her bachelor's degree, and she's doing some teaching, which is great. But I really didn't have mentors in the way that I had parents or anything like, or family members that I could say, oh, this person was a lawyer or what have you. And I had great examples from them in life and in morals and ethics, but in terms of being a lawyer, I sort of had to look to television and immediately began to watch Law and Order episodes and fell in love with that and figured, hey, I should be a DA. I always enjoyed detective work and thought I wanted to be a detective. Played around with the idea of, getting into, the CIA or the FBI, but ultimately ended up going to school, kind of found a pathway, had a lot of blessings along the way and a lot of hard work, and ultimately got into law school. and I had, a vision of being in politics and taking the DA route. And the politics route is definitely still going to happen in the future, but I think for now, the DA piece is definitely long gone. And
Yeah.
the reason for that is, ultimately what ended up happening was I ended up interning for the public defender, had a clerkship with the Superior Court, a graduate law clerkship, ended up working for a couple civil litigation firms, for a couple criminal defense lawyers,
Yeah.
worked for a large, very large law firm, Quinn Emanuel. And all those experiences really led me to believe that even much as I thought I wanted to be a litigator, I was much more of a peacemaker and a deal maker. And
Got
and
it.
I wanted to do contracts and deal making and bringing people together. And once I figured that out, I was like, well, being a lawyer can be tough. And I
Yeah.
might as well practice what I want to practice. I've been working for people for years, and I really didn't want to be in the corporate environment. And of course, a lot of the corporate culture has changed these days with
Yeah.
COVID and everything else, and corporations trying to be more cool, if you will. But ultimately, ended up having an experience where I competed in this international baseball arbitration competition
Yeah.
and at Tulane Law School down in New Orleans. And it really kind of just opened my mind to this fact that I could get into doing what I loved and make money at it. And so I sort of just kind of put pen to paper, and I had a lot of people encouraging me to open my own practice. And I just thought, well, if I'm gonna open my own practice, I might as well practice what I like. I enjoyed
Yeah.
doing plays as a kid, acted in a few plays, enjoyed watching film and entertainment, television and film, and enjoyed any sort of film class I could get my hands on in college. And then, of course, enjoyed the relationship business. And of course, loved playing sports and played baseball as a kid and
Yeah.
was very good at analytics and other things. And so I just kind of put all those things together and in a very naive way, launched my own law practice. And that's sort of how
That's California sports lawyer, right? So
that's
you
it.
went from, if I from tracking you, it's funny. You're it's uncommon or unique the path that you took, but the story is similar, right? So when lawyers get started, they're trying to figure out how the world works, so they end up at a few different firms, and um, they get exposed to what they like, what they don't like. But not everybody has the courage, right, to go out and start their own law firm. Many want to, right? And I always encourage people, don't die with a song left inside you, go do it. Um, you founded California Sports Lawyer in a very competitive space, right? And it's funny, I've got a former business partner. He's a great entrepreneur, but he is going to go out swinging, trying to break into the music business as a musician himself. He's going to give up all his time and treasure trying to do that. So it's not easy, right? Getting into the space that you're in. So talk about like with the stumbling blocks out of the gate. How did you figure out your niche and start to build a following? Because that's not easy to do.
No, I appreciate you asking that, and I think it's a very important question because I think part of it is being very resilient and being very disciplined, but also being very open to change. And in many ways, learning to embrace the uncertainty and enjoying that uncertainty. And that's not a place that a lot of people like to be.
Right.
And so, what I sort of often say is that, um, everyone should strive to be an entrepreneur, but not everybody should be an entrepreneur. And so, I think that through a lot of trial and error, one of the greatest pieces of advice that I got early on was to put on the list of five people that I looked up to in the legal space. Didn't have to be in my practice area, and as it turns out, none of them are in my practice area. But I was able to sit down and have conversations with these five different lawyers, and then from there ask them for five more names, or if I just had different names, I would go meet with them. So through text message or email, coffee, lunch, dinner, even group dinners, I would get together with folks and ask questions. And I gained a lot of wisdom through that and saved a lot of
Yeah.
headache and heartache. The other thing I did not realize I was doing at the time was I was also marketing myself because
Right.
inevitably the next question is, well, what are you doing? What are you building? And I think the other thing that helped me was that early on in my legal sort of classes, I remember attending a sports entertainment event, one of these sort of sports law society or entertainment law society events, and there was about 400 people in the room at this event. And when asked the question, "Who wants to be the next Jerry Maguire?" everybody in the class raised their hand, including me. By the time I graduated with about the same amount of people, 300, 400 people, I think it was about 396 if I recall correctly. But ultimately, out of that class, I was the only person pursuing a career in sports and entertainment, specifically in sports and specifically as a sole practitioner. There was nobody else
Right.
that was landing a job with a firm doing sports entertainment.
Right.
There was a couple people that were dear friends of mine that went into the studio side. So either it was very naive and very dumb or very innovative, maybe a little bit of both. And so that's kind of how it played out. And
Yeah.
I think ultimately it was just about, I also learned very early on, and I'll share this with the audience, that it's very important to sort of focus on geography, branding, and community. You got to be where the action's
Geography,
happening.
branding, community. Yep.
Yeah, yep. You've got to be where the action's happening. You have to create, maintain a brand, which means creating content. As
Yep.
Jonathan Perelman would say, who is a former executive at another agency, but now is currently at CAA, content is king, but distribution is queen, and she wears the pants. And
Yeah.
you really have to
True.
be, yeah, and then the last piece is community, which I think a lot of people miss out on. You have to join organizations and get involved in leadership and make an impact. Not only is it good for the community, but it's also great for relationships. And I think through those things and a lot of blessings, a lot of prayer, I was able to get through it. And I'm no major success. I mean, I pay the bills, but um, I'm happy and I'm
Right.
content. And I think that that's important.
I You don't hear that a lot when you talk to lawyers.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of
Yeah.
words I can think of that lawyers use to
Yeah.
describe themselves. Those would be more elusive than others. Um, but what's interesting though is when you were talking, I was thinking about, in college and you say to someone, oh, what do you want to do? Oh, I'm going to get involved in sports. I want to do something with sports. I played sports my whole life. And then you think about the line of kids waiting to get into ESPN to interview for, whatever position that would, that they can get. But there's such a tiny, it's kind of like football, right? It's like playing football. The kids in high school, everybody wants to be in the NFL, and then that gets whittled down a little bit more, and then post college gets whittled down a lot more, and then just a tiny fraction of the people have the fortitude. That's what I hear is fortitude, right? It's real fortitude, and like you said, it's either you didn't know what you didn't know, and so that didn't stop you, or you ignored the percentages and you went and did it, and then you found a niche for yourself. So I think that's really cool, and it's a great lesson for lawyers coming out, right? Is that you've got to find a lane you love, and that'll probably help you with the aspirational stuff to get there, versus taking that first job and you're like, ah, see how it goes, right? So you've got some purpose behind you as well. And I love the idea that you mentioned getting involved in the community, right? Being a leader. And I've noticed that not only will you either participate in organizations, you'll start them. And I think that's really cool. And one of the things I want to make sure that I get this right. So you had mentioned competing, I think at Tulane, right, in this mediation competition. And then you launched the National Sports Law Negotiation Competition. Talk a little bit about that. What's the inspiration for that, and how is that impacting the next generation of lawyers?
No, and thanks for asking that, Tim. And it's really, I got goosebumps when you were mentioning that because I still look so fondly back on launching that and have since launched the California Sports Lawyer Negotiation Competition, which is hosted at the Rose Bowl every year. And it's it's really what it boiled down to was I had this amazing experience. Most of law school, you're learning a lot, you're learning a new language, you're meeting great people, you're having terrific experiences. And in my situation, especially because I ended up doing a study abroad program between my first and second year where I had never left the country before, other than a couple family trips to Mexico into Baja.
Yeah.
And that was the extent of it. And it was sort of a proximity thing because we were closer to the border. But my first flight was into Hong Kong, and and ultimately what ended up being a 3 month trip where I visited uh, 19 countries and 29 cities in 3 months,
Wow.
and literally flew around the world, and then served as uh, 1L class rep, and then served as vice president and editor in chief of the student newspaper, and then president of the student bar. So I mean, I had an amazing experience, and the classes could be fun, but sometimes it could be mundane,
Yeah.
for subject matter. And we had great professors, but I had this opportunity to go compete and argue over baseball contracts in a mock arbitration competition, and had such an amazing time with that that I sort of obviously, we didn't win that
Yeah.
first year, which wasn't great, but I took that level of loss and thought, how can I make this better and what can I do to improve? And so I ended up launching the National Sports Law Negotiation Competition, which is still running to this day, still a great success for the law school. And that was the entire point, was to create something
Amazing.
successful and pass it on. And that's what you do as a business owner. When you're creating and you're investing in things, you're building things and passing them on. And
Yeah.
so created this competition. We had 20 teams the first year. We had 40 teams, pretty much every year after that. And we would
Nice.
have these mock negotiations where these students would get real life negotiation experience with judges, lawyers and that sort of thing that would come in and grade their experience. They would get awards and be able to network. And we would take them to a Padres game because I went to law school in San Diego. One of the
Yeah.
years it worked out perfectly where one of the negotiations was Clayton Kershaw doing a Gatorade deal, and it happened that the Dodgers were playing the Padres. And we put everybody in a suite. We had everybody in the Western Metal Supply building. We had
Yeah.
the owner of the Padres come by. We had Hall of Famers come by.
Oh, that's
It
cool.
was awesome. And
Yeah.
then from that experience, I moved back to Los Angeles because the whole geography piece, I needed to be in and around LA in the market
Yeah.
in Hollywood, and ended up getting on the Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation board, which gives back to the community.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you, and looks to really build up and maintain the Rose Bowl for all its greatness,
Yeah.
and ultimately from there worked with one of my colleagues and friends, Deedon Brozino, who's the president, and ended up building this competition that is now we've got 3 years. We had 24 teams this last year, and it's just been a fantastic way to
Wow.
raise money. And in that one, we do some very innovative things, and then
Yeah. Now, are those students, Jeremy? Law
they're
school
all law
students, right?
students.
All law school. Yeah, got it. Okay.
And some of the cool things I'll just mention really quickly about it is it's the first competition of its kind to do entertainment, media, and sports topics.
Wow.
Uh, we specifically recruit judges who are in the entertainment, media, sports business. And I say judges in the sense that they're just judging, not necessarily
Yeah.
judges,
Yeah.
that way. The first to offer MCLE credit, which we negotiated
Wow.
through, which actually I secured when I was president of the California Lawyers Association, and then it ended up later being able to use that to benefit the community. And then we had electronic scoring. It used to be you have to write down the
Yeah.
judges write down your scores, and now it's electronic. We actually gave the students a brick in the courtyard of the Rose Bowl where they were to put their name on it if
Wow.
if they if they were one of the four finalist teams.
Yeah. So this
We
thing's
give.
taken off.
Oh yeah, we've given them a tour. We have keynote speakers. Fantastic opportunity, and just proud to give back and proud to do it. And by the way, it's a great marketing thing.
Yeah, I can see how it checks a lot of boxes, but that's really cool. And just the idea of the fact that it's law school students who are at a time in life where, they got a lot going on, not the least of which is they're trying to get through law school. And to provide something that's a creative outlet that they can compete and it probably feels more realistic than the other stuff they're doing in the classroom, I think is just freaking awesome. And I'm sitting here and I mean, I was actually inspired as I'm listening and thinking about ways that I could do something similar to improve the reach and the appeal of the podcast to incorporate some competitions in that, right? We've certainly got no shortage of law school students in New England, and include them and the professors. I think that's a really neat thing.
Thank
So
you.
congratulations on your success with that. You're definitely an influential guy, which I got to ask the question because our listeners love to talk about AI a little bit, right? That you're also in leadership of the CLA Task Force on AI. What is CLA and what is the task force trying to accomplish?
No, thanks. So, yeah, the California Lawyers Association, which is one of the largest bar associations in the country, voluntary bar associations in the country, and I was president of it from 2021, 2023. I'm currently the president of the nonprofit arm, which is the
Yeah,
California Lawyers Foundation. And the CLA is really there as a volunteer arm to advocate for lawyers, to put on education, provide networking opportunities, and it's just a terrific place for lawyers to meet and engage with each other. And so I had noticed that, you know, obviously AI has always been, and technology is always, it's always been an interest of mine. And this, my father was interested in technology, my grandfather, they always seem to be at the cutting edge of the newest computer or just trying to keep up. And that always encouraged me because I was like, wow, even though you get to be educated in a space, you constantly need to be relearning things and adapting. You know,
yeah,
when I was in junior high, it wasn't that long ago. Uh, you know, in terms of time, um, you know, it wasn't like, you know, we didn't have cell phones. You know, really cell phones weren't really used until, you
yeah,
know, you kind of got out of high school and into college, and computers weren't really used. You were still handwriting things
yeah,
and learning cursive. And so I just thought, you know, we have to have a task force on this to research AI and how it can affect the practice of law and how lawyers should be utilizing AI. So we formed this task force. My vice chair was the former CTO of NASA and JPL, who was a non-lawyer, but a guy named Dr. Chris Mattman. He's now the CTO at UCLA,
yeah,
and just a terrific individual. And we had so many other great lawyers on this panel, and we just took a year to do research, and it resulted in a very efficient and business-friendly 10-page paper that's
yeah,
published online. It just helps people. And there was other bars that did things, and they did great work. Even the state bar did some great work, and we refer to a lot of that. But we wanted something very practical, not something that was 300 pages long.
yeah,
And the general results were this. One, if you're using generative AI, do
yeah,
not, in your inputs and in your outputs, do not have confidential, private, privileged, uh, and
yeah,
intellectually property protected information. That was the first step. The second was you have to have human review. It's no different than having an associate, but even more so, you have to review your inputs and your outputs. You can't just rely
yeah,
on what comes out and say, here's the paper, here's the this or that. And the third piece is that there may come a time where you have to disclose that you've used it. Um,
yeah.
so, and I think that's really what we came down to. The task force, you know, finished its work, and you know, it may reassemble if needed, but for current times, we finished our work, and then people have moved on.
That is great work, and I think those are on point, right? We never advocate without getting into, my business. We never advocate for no human in the middle, right?
Right.
This got to be trust and verify for sure, and certainly, and I think there's a lack of understanding around using open AI sources, um, and I kind of joke because when you talk to lawyers about using AI, politics aside, it's like trying to find a Trump supporter, right? No one's ever going to admit vote for Donald Trump. I'm not going to vote for Trump. And just like if it's asking a lawyer to use AI, and then they turn around and the guys. So they're all doing something with it. It's just at different levels, and it's an interesting time. And I love the fact that and California's ahead on a lot of things, right? They tend to be more progressive because we do a lot of work at the association level, bar association level, in places really interesting places, um, and there's no published code of ethics, there's no guidance, there's no, I think there's still, people are a little concerned about, you know, what to say, how to say it, where to say it. And then there's the nuance, obviously, is while there's a requirement per se, an implied requirement that lawyers need to be using the most cutting edge tools to provide the best advocacy for their clients. The flip side of that is, and don't do this, 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 this. So it's an interesting time for the, this inflection point of AI and the law. And I think it's great that you're doing the hard work to provide that that advocacy. So, and I think that's good advice that you gave. But I can't, before we end, I have to absolutely ask you about what the hell's going on with NIL. And there was this, I was doing some reading. The College Sports Commission, the evolution of the College Sports Commission, I guess, is now a thing. And so in 2 minutes, where are we at with NIL? And is this going to be great for the world? Not so great for the world? What's your humble opinion? What's your take?
Right. Well, I think, it's interesting. I was going to joke at first when you mentioned the thing about Trump, and I was like, well, there was 77 million people who voted for him. So maybe, so there's definitely support out there, but,
I love it. That's
yeah,
asking them to admit it's a little tricky.
yeah. There's definitely some sort of
I get it.
blowback as to that, in terms of like people being scared to speak out and that sort of thing. But I think with the NIL stuff, this is so interesting because um, there's going to actually, Lee Steinberg and I have a piece coming out. Lee Steinberg, the
Yep.
super agent, and we've been
Yeah.
good friends for many years. And we wrote a piece
Was
together.
he part of Athletes in Action?
I'm not sure about that,
Got it. Okay.
but we wrote a piece together that's going to be coming out in Los Angeles Lawyer about the need for change in college athletics, and we take a different approach than I think most people might expect. I think there's been a lot of, and in this sort of next segment, I'm talking for myself, but
Yeah.
there's been a lot of push towards let's pay these athletes, let's pay these athletes. And I think that's a mistake from the standpoint that this needs to be more organized. The Wild West, the having schools pay the athletes directly. I would argue these are all mistakes.
Yeah.
The fact is that these athletes were mostly looking for coverage in terms of scholarships, housing, transportation, and that's what the Alston case was all about. That there was a collusion amongst the universities to limit the amount of money that was coming in, and that was right for the Supreme Court to do that, and it was a 9-0 decision.
Yeah.
But the O'Bannon cases and these other cases, the House settlement that Judge Wilkin and other courts have looked at, have been sort of about this idea that we're going to grant or trying to grant, direct payments. And the judges have all stopped short of doing that. Judge Wilkin went as far as to say, oh, maybe a $5,000, payment, but even that wasn't
Direct
necessarily
payment from the schools versus the companies. You mean? Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah. I'm tracking.
Now,
Okay.
and I'll distinguish that with NIL, which is to say, if somebody provides a service, you post so many times on social media, you make so many appearances, you should get paid for that. And the athletes never should have been restricted from that because that's private capitalism. You should be able to
Right.
do that. And the NCAA should never been able to limit that. And I think that's fair game. I think players should be able to do that, and that's fine. I think this idea that universities are getting into managing money and paying athletes, you open up so many different questions with
Yeah.
this House settlement as to unionization, employee classification, Title IX issues. Are you going to pay the top quarterback the same amount of money as the volleyball team or the rowing team?
Right.
It's just because at the end of the day, if we're talking about fair market value,
Yeah.
um, clearly there's going to be a difference. So there's a lot of issues that come out of this, but I think this College Sports Commission has the potential to become more powerful than the Power Four conferences and the NCAA. And I was a little bit surprised, and basically what they're going to be is a clearinghouse for NIL deals.
Got it.
So this will be on top of the 20 to 22 million that each school is going to have set aside. That's sharing a revenue.
Yeah.
Um, but it's going to be very powerful because much like Congress controls the purse strings, there's going to be the whole process is going to run through them. I
Yeah.
don't think it solves all the problems, but it definitely addresses some of the issues. But this is not the last we're going to hear of it. And the last thing I'll say is that I was disappointed, but I guess I understand it that the NCAA did not step up and say, we will manage this, we will regulate this. They will be only NIL deals private. The only job we're doing is approving them to make sure they're not pay for play and investigating where needed. I was surprised they deferred to creating this new body,
Yeah.
but I also understand it. The NCAA is an educational arm. Uh,
Right.
but that being said, it somewhat doesn't make sense because they still run March Madness. So to me, I don't know sort of what the vision is here, but maybe this is the solution for, for now.
Interesting. One last question as you were explaining that. So my limited understanding of use the NFL, for example, is there's only certain agents that there's a process that an agent has to go, a sports agent has to go through to to negotiate an NFL contract. Is that happening with these NIL deals? In other words, are there going to be certain types of lawyers, certain certified lawyers that can handle these things, or is that what it is now, or not quite yet?
No, it's not. There's a lot of what you would call marketing deals. So you're not necessarily acting as an agent. It is such an interesting space.
Hmm.
And I've called attention to this many years. I've written columns about the differences between lawyers and agents and the ethical responsibilities of lawyers and what they have to follow and why lawyers often or people who go to law school often don't practice law and get barred
Yeah.
because of the ethical obligations with in-person contact and everything else. Now, truth of it is, you don't, you could try not to follow those rules and run the risk of being disciplined. But I just learned early on in my own practice as a a personal example that unless you had a lot of the big clients, you weren't going to make good money, or unless you had a lot of clients, you weren't going to make good money. And I also enjoyed more of the legal and the deal making than I did of the sort of hand holding and the other parts of the relationship that you have to deal with and
The
work through
management.
as an agent. And it just that wasn't for me. There's some
Yeah.
great agents out there and that's wonderful, but it just wasn't for me. And so I think that there's a lot of unregulated space, and I'm not a one that would sort of call for regulation and everything, but I will say there's been some issues where um, you know, even in the entertainment side, where you have the Talent Agencies Act and you have the Miller Ayala Act in California and you have the Sparta Act for federal, where you have to register. But there's definitely a lot of cutting of the lines of
Yeah.
saying, well, I'm only doing the marketing deal, and so I haven't crossed that line. But if you're, and of course, there you have to distinguish between team sports and individual sports. Most of the individual sports don't have unions, so there's really no
Right.
process to go through. But I would say most teams will not talk to you directly unless you're registered. I don't know if the schools are enforcing that as well. Probably not because they
Yeah.
don't have contact with that. They're just getting reported the deal by the
Yeah.
student. So it's very, very interesting.
It's interesting. Final on that is, and I would assume there's an outsized influence on the parents, and that can be very tricky at that age when you're the personnel management around that process. To your point, is
Yeah,
something
yeah.
it's
It's
tricky.
one of
It's
the
tricky.
biggest things. I mean, it's managing your client and managing client expectations. And a lot of the times you have parents who love their kids very much, and that's
Yeah.
admirable. But I think in that sometimes your passion clouds your judgment,
Yeah.
and you think that maybe even though your kid is God's gift to the world, they may not be the best baseball player
Right.
and or football player. And so
Right.
I think it's understanding that. And what I often tell parents is this: we live in a day and an age where people are accessible and you can see things online, you can follow people on social media, you can post a video. There's scouts everywhere. I know that for a fact. There's these teams specifically go out and look for scouts in unknown places
Right.
and clearly find them. And the better teams are good at that. And so, and I'd even point to the Dodgers over many years, signing many guys out of Mexico and other places around the world that other teams missed,
Right.
and just gave it an opportunity. So, I tell parents, look, if your kid is talented, they will be seen. It's
Right.
not going to be through efforts by you to contact teams. Now, you may in 1 in 100, 1 in 100,000, 1 in 1 million, maybe
Yeah.
more, come across a situation where your kid is unknown and you have a relationship and you get a tryout. I've definitely seen that. I've definitely, had
Yeah.
players that probably didn't deserve a tryout or or um or were sort of stretching to get a tryout and get one. That's
Yeah.
definitely happened. But that's through relationships. But again, to your point, it is something that can be difficult to manage, but it's also part of that relationship. And I think if you can gain the trust of the parents and have a good rapport, mutual trust, I
Yeah.
think things can go a far way.
I feel like the end of that conversation is that sports are at a place where those are pretty efficient marketplaces when it comes to,
Yes.
you know what
Yes.
I'm saying? And then
Yes.
lastly, first of all, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that's a little far afield from the main goal of the podcast, but it's really about what people want to hear. And I know that's a super popular topic, and your insights are certainly appreciated there. And then finally, we always love to ask, what advice do you have for young lawyers or law students who might want to follow in your footsteps, who want to do what you do and do it at the highest level to make an impact in sports and entertainment? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Tim. I would say, you have to be disciplined, um, stay consistent, and be the last person standing. Think oftentimes people quit, they give up, they move on to other things, and that's no knock on them.
Yeah.
But I hear, unfortunately, more often than not, "Wow, you're doing what I wanted to do," and that's from lawyers who've been practicing for 40 years to high
Yeah.
school students. And I think just stick with it. And you hear this from all the people we look up to in sports about just sticking with it. Don't give up. Keep pursuing it. Keep your foot on the gas pedal. All that. And so that would be my advice to people. Just if you really want to do something, number one, get experience to find out whether you actually like it or not, or whether you like something else.
Yep.
And then two, once you figure it out what it is that you like, just continue to strive for it.
I think that's really sound advice. Probably a great place to wind down. This has been great. Really enjoy. This is a fantastic conversation, and it'll be super interesting for our listeners. I really appreciate you being transparent and vulnerable and honest. All the things that you look for in great podcast content. I think that's really cool, and it kind of gives us a vision as to where the profession is headed with AI. The fact that you've done due diligence around that's a huge service. So I really want to appreciate it. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. We ask that they not forget to subscribe, leave a review, and check out fasteroutcomes.com. Faster Outcomes is the ultimate AI-powered legal intelligence platform for law firms and lawyers of all shapes and sizes. So until next time, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. And lastly, once again, thank you for taking the time today, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks, Tim. Honored to be with you.